Well, pastors, thanks for taking a couple of minutes to meet with us, even virtually. And COVID has changed pretty much everything about ministry, and it's been exciting. Great things actually have come of it. I've talked to many pastors, and even my own ministry has been positively impacted because of COVID. Yeah, it's had some downsides, but also some upsides. And so we know that your kingdom work's important. And so we want to take a couple of minutes and address this ERC thing that Richard and Kyle have been chatting with me about over these last number of weeks. And our bios, our links to our websites are in the description. So if you want to get more information on that, we would encourage you to do that. But we want to talk a little bit about ERCs and an amazing resource they can be to kickstart ministry, to expand some other kind of ministry that you would love to start. And so, guys, as I've been chatting with pastors about this, they seem to all have the same concern. When they bring their board members in, here are the top two or three questions that we want to address in that. And so, Richard, we're going to start with you since you've got just a little bit of experience with these ERC things. So what are ERCs, and how do I know if my church or my nonprofit qualifies?
Sure. So ERCs are employee retention credits.
Mm-hmm.
They came out at the beginning of 2020 at the same time as the PPP loans. Originally, you had a choice. You could get a PPP loan or you could get an ERC credit. Most people took PPP loans, and quite honestly, it was the right thing to do. Much easier to calculate, much easier to quantify what you're going to get. At the end of 2020, Congress changed their mind and did a couple of things. They decided that you could get both an ERC credit and a PPP loan. They included nonprofits in who would qualify for ERC credits, and they expanded the program from 2020 into 2021. So basically, you could get up to $5,000 per employee for 2020 and $7,000 per employee per quarter for the first 3 quarters of 2021. So that's a total of $26,000. However, you can't get both an ERC credit and take the employee portion of the PPP loan forgiveness. So if you take the number of employees times 26,000 minus the employee portion of your PPP loan forgiveness, that's approximately what you would get. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but the reality is that's pretty close. One of the questions you asked is, how do I know that churches qualify?
Right.
Well, there are two ways to qualify, and most people are focused on number one, which is a drop in sales. In the nonprofit world, a drop in giving. So if giving is down from 2019 to 2020 by 50%, or from 2019 to 2021 by 20%, then they would qualify based on that. But not everyone is down in giving. However, the second way to qualify is something called a business disruption caused by a governmental mandate. And what does that mean? What that means is that there are things that specifically in the nonprofit world where there was an inability to gather. So an inability to gather means, did your church have to shut its doors and not let people in? Did the church have to limit the number of people that could be inside of an area? Did they have to limit how many people or what the distance was between people in certain types of areas? So if any of those things were true, then they would qualify. The question would become, what period do they qualify for? And basically the period is whenever the local, county, state, and federal mandates were put into place, that's the quarters that they would qualify. So every state's different, every county's different, every locality is different. So how do we know what those are? So we have a tax attorney that actually researches that for us.
So tell us a little bit about that tax attorney as part of your team. I know we're going to kind of circle back to this whole thing, but that seems a little bit complicated. So tell us a little bit about your partnership with him and how does
Sure.
he help play this out?
Yeah, so our tax attorney is somebody that that is a specialty tax attorney. All he does is basically employee retention credits. He's an ex-IRS litigator, and this is his specialty. So he actually travels the country and lectures to CPA firms on how to do employee retention credits.
Okay. So it would make sense then to have someone on your team like that.
Absolutely.
Let me say the duh statement.
They have a tax and legal team, and this is a tax and legal project. In other words, the credit has to be quantified by the tax team, and then they build a legal file that documents how the governmental mandates affected your ministry, your church at your locality. Does that make sense? So it's two completely different files that have to be put together.
Okay. So in the business world that you've been working with ERCs, and you've done about how many of these ERCs in your other businesses?
We've done over 250. Our tax attorney has filed over 1,000 returns, so we've done a lot of them.
Okay, that does sound like a lot. So it's not like you're just starting off fresh today.
We have a whole team designated to making these work, and we have the entire process, I don't want to say automated, but very, very detailed in how we walk through the process. And we've made it as easy as we possibly can for the client, because it truly is a very complex topic.
Mm-hmm. Of course. I think working with government can easily go there. So we want to do that. So if you're looking at between $20,000 and $26,000, $25,000 per employee, based on your numbers that you threw at us without the PPP, that sounds way too good to be true. So Kyle, why would the government give us no strings attached, bunches of money?
Sure. I think it's a couple of important distinctions to look at there. The first is that the money that comes back to you is not a loan like the PPP was. It's not a credit to be applied towards future liabilities, but it's a refund of what you've already paid in payroll taxes. So the government is giving you your money back. It's not a new program. It's not something that there's expectations upon that return, but they're returning money that you've already paid in federal payroll taxes.
Okay. So that's way too good to be true. It sounds like absolutely amazing. The government's going to refund us a bunch of money and say, here you go, have at it.
Yeah, it was part of the stimulus package to make sure that the economy stayed on track during COVID. It came out as part of the CARES Act. And so that was the intent. The intent was to infuse cash back into the economy to try and help stabilize the economy and to reward business owners, particularly small business owners or nonprofit leaders, for keeping people employed during that period of time, because they recognized that there were some days there where we didn't quite know what the future looked like. Right. And that was their idea of how to make sure that the U.S. economy stayed employed to the extent that it did during that pandemic.
Okay, so you had mentioned small business. So if I remember correctly, that's any business under 500 employees, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so most churches and or Christian schools would probably be under 500.
Yes, that's correct. And the way they calculate it is based on full-time equivalents, which is probably a little bit more complicated than today's scope. But it's not necessarily just employees. So if you have a church or an organization that has around that number, it would still behoove you to look into it, because there might be something that we can do in the calculation of how the IRS looks at full-time equivalent workers, because it's that full-time equivalent, not necessarily 500 W-2s.
Sure. And I remember, Richard, one of our conversations about this, you said you had done a business like with 2 employees.
Yes.
And so, 30, 40 grand is 30, 40 grand.
And it made all the difference in the world to those guys.
Right.
It's a small woodworking shop. Quite honestly, we got a lot more benefit, personal satisfaction out of doing that return than we do for many, larger business owners. Yeah. So, it really is for virtually everyone that has 2 employees.
Yeah. So pastors out there, if you only got a couple of people, it's still worth it.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Kyle, what are the risks in this thing? How am I setting myself up?
There's a number of things that I want to point out, both in the process and how and how it plays out for the church. The first being that cash flow in any nonprofit or church is of crucial importance. So one of the distinctions in how we work with churches and any small business is that all of the fees that are due for this credit are due upon receipt of the money back from the IRS. So all of the study that's done by the tax attorney team, all of our work to help compile the information, all of the preparation that goes into amending a 941 is done on a contingency basis, and none of those funds are due until that money is paid back from the IRS. You'll want to watch out for firms that are charging upfront fees, because it's very easy to charge an upfront fee and not deliver, but we make sure that our alignment is with the small church pastor or with the nonprofit, so that all of those fees are going to be due once they have the money and not put them in a bind from a cash flow perspective. Those returns are auditable from the IRS by the IRS for up to 2 years after you've received those checks back. But an important distinction there is that audit defense is included in the engagement that we have with the tax team. So if those returns were to be audited, they would defend the individual at no cost to the individual. One of the other distinctions, which makes it really exciting to do in the nonprofit space, is that for a small business owner, which we worked with many, this is a taxable event for them. They have to recognize this as income. But in the nonprofit space, as long as this is spent in the nonprofit, that's just bonus money that can go to further ministry. So it's a really exciting sector of the market that I enjoy working with, to see those tax dollars come back to the churches and be deployed on mission.
And that's one of the things why I started chatting with pastors and other ministry people around, is after our conversations, Richard and Kyle, is I thought, wait a minute, these ministry leaders have no idea this is happening.
Right.
And so we're just trying to get the word out. That's why we're doing the video. That's why we're doing the letters. That's why we're having conversations, is because what an exciting prospect to consider that you could do kingdom work with basically a refund that the government says, well, here's your money back, and go for it. Do, in essence, what God has put on your heart to do to reach your community, to help fund missions, whatever that may or may not be. So Richard, I've watched a couple of videos on YouTube. I'm a big YouTube guy, and I watched a couple of videos about this, right? The ERCs and nonprofits, and they pull out their whiteboard behind them, and it's like super complicated. And I'm like, I don't have a PhD in ERCs, and so I'm just a simple guy. So why would it be beneficial? You've mentioned some things already, but why would it be beneficial for a pastor and his or her church to call me? Because that's really what we're asking you to do in an action step here in a minute. Is why would it be beneficial for them to call us to get the ball rolling, as opposed to showing the video to their bookkeeper or their CPA and say, go for it?
Sure. Well, I guess if their bookkeeper is a specialty tax attorney that specializes in this area and is able to build a legal file, then that may work for them. But the reality is that the reason that they qualify is not just a calculation. You're really looking at the mandates that were put into place. And so we have made the process as simple as we possibly can. We basically gather the payroll records. We gather the copies of their payroll tax returns. We get new hire and termination reports, and then some information about the organization. And then we do all of that work for them. We had one client that, on a business side, that owns about 8 companies, and they did the calculation themselves, and they were very excited that they were going to get about $190,000 back in ERC money, until we took a look at it and realized that he should have gotten over $2 million back. And so I would encourage the use of using somebody like our tax attorney to look at how much they can get back, just to make sure that you get back as much as possible. The other issue, as Kyle indicated, is the audit defense. If there's a mistake, if there's a problem, if the IRS just randomly picks you for some reason, you're going to have to pay for that representation. If in fact you're picked, and that's included for us. So I think there's a number of reasons why we have so many clients, and really CPA firms that use us to do these calculations.
Nice. Well, we like simple, at least most of us do. And so you're realistically looking at a couple hours of your bookkeeper to pull these numbers together?
Well, I guess it really kind of depends. How long does it take to run reports for, 2019, 20, and 2021, by employee, by payroll? It may be a couple hours. They may not know where the login for their payroll system is.
Yeah.
It really just depends. We've had clients get us all of the data that we need in one day.
Okay.
So
nice. Good. So really, ultimately, that's what we're suggesting is give us a call. Let's get this process started. There are deadlines that the government has imposed on this. It is a simple process for you pastors and board members to get it going. And, our heart, our passion, we've been involved in kingdom work for, myself, almost 4 decades vocationally. So I have a heart for the Church of Jesus and expanding it. So we would love it. Give me a call. That information is obviously part of this email and in the description below as well. So let's get it started. We'll have a conversation, take a few minutes. I have sat in on the last one I sat in on, Richard, with your Zoom call. It was like 13 minutes long with a multi-million-dollar business. And it is that simple. And so that's why I say that. It is a pretty simple process for you, the pastor and or board member, to say, you know what, I'm glad you're concerned. And you can get all your questions answered as best as Richard and Kyle can answer them. And we're here to walk you through the front end of this thing and then watch what God provides ultimately for ministry work. So it is that simple. Give me a call. Email me if you'd prefer. We'll set up a time to either make a call or do a little Zoom thing. And let's get this happening because there are deadlines and it is simple. So any last thoughts, gentlemen?
No, I would just say that obviously this is a complicated transaction in the elements of the legal opinion and qualifying the credit, and who you do it with matters. And if you think about yourself sitting across the table from the IRS 2 years from now, I think that the people that are sitting next to you are important. And we would be thrilled to be part of that team that's able to stand and defend churches and watch those resources be used to advance the kingdom.
Yep. I think the only thing I could add, Dave, is that both Kyle and I are very passionate about kingdom work. Mm-hmm. And the idea and the thought that we can use our skills and talents in order to help expand the kingdom is extremely exciting. And I think this is a great way that we can do that.
And it's money the government wants to give you so you can do that work. So looking forward to hearing from you and pastor or board member, and let's get this baby going. So looking forward to that phone call. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.